There's that unique feeling when you get your ESOP statement and
Mm.
you're like, wow, that's pretty great. But like at TVF, we have some core values: put relationships first, be accountable, care deeply, always improve. If you really believe in those and you really take notice of those, I think then you start to realize what it means to be in an ownership culture. You're accountable. You say you're going to do something and you do it. It's not as tangible as, a total on a statement. But if you're living and breathing those core values and you're learning what it's like to be in an ownership culture, I think that probably means more really in the long run.
So I thought a good place to start would be, maybe to learn how you ended up at TVF in the first place. And I think it involves your mom somehow. So I was curious to hear more about that.
Yeah. So my mom was a customer of TVF. She bought fabric from Ken Szynski. She had her own women's biker apparel company. So she made clothing for women bikers and accessories for motorcycles. So she bought a bunch of fabric from TVF. And when I was graduating from college, she recommended that I apply since she had heard from Ken that he was looking for a sales assistant. And she had always loved her experience with Ken. She just loved Ken because he's just so nice and so funny and always helped her with finding the right fabric for what she needed. So I applied, and it took a little while. It was tough to get through the interview process with Robert and Ken, but I got in and I haven't looked back since.
That's great. I want to pick that thread up from there. But before we keep going, also that, how did your mom end up with a business that, a women's biker clothing business? That's just sounds like a really interesting story.
So my mom is someone who is very creative, and she constantly has done all kinds of different things in her life, but she's always been in fashion. So when I was younger, she did denim jeans was her big. She was a VP of a denim jean company, helped manufacture private label denim for stores like Sears and Mervyn's at the time. There's a bunch of other chain stores that she worked for. So as a kid, I got to go with her. We went to Taiwan. We've been to Cambodia. I got to see mills with her, which was really always very cool. I got to go with her to New York a few times for the fashion shows. In Vegas, there is another big fashion show that we got to go to a few times. So I got to, as a single mom, I got to tag along with her a lot, which was a really great experience for me and kind of played into how my role at TVF has developed, which is it's like destiny, right? It kind of works out that way sometimes. But so she went from working in denim jeans, and then in I think it was, when was it? I don't remember exactly when, but her and a friend of hers started getting into motorcycles, like Harley Davidsons, and they would go to Sturgis. And while they were at Sturgis, realized that there wasn't a huge market for women. It's a pretty male-dominated market. But the women have a very specific aesthetic that they would like, and they want functional clothing too. So my mom kind of developed like shirts that were a little bit longer so that when you're riding your bike, there's no ride up, you're not showing anything you don't want to show. And she needed like a poly spandex and wanted some wild, crazy prints. So she had like flames and cheetah print, pretty fun. But that's how it all kind of came together. And then they started with a small booth at Sturgis, and every year it grew and grew. And that's her story. But now she lives full time in South Dakota and has fallen in love with that area. Doesn't have the company anymore, but has started another one since then. So she's doing great.
Wow. Your mom sounds like an amazing person. Super interesting story for sure. So she ended up working with Ken at TVF on some of the fabrics for that business.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. And then you ended up selling. So did you ever think you would be in the textile industry growing up? Was that? No?
No, I really didn't. I thought for a little bit, maybe I would do like fashion design. I used to spend my summers at her office and I'd work with the designers. I remember specifically like drawing up overalls with like certain pocket designs, thinking that would be really cool. I always had a love for fiber arts. So, I liked knitting and crocheting, or we did silk paintings. We did all this stuff in these fiber art classes that I always really enjoyed. But I never dreamed that there was like an actual career in textiles.
Yes.
And I feel really fortunate and lucky that I found one.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I'm curious too about all that travel that you got to do growing up, like all over the world, kind of. Do you feel like that had any kind of an impact on you?
I do. I mean, I think anybody who's traveled will probably say that it's like a huge impact because it gets you outside of your comfort zone, gets you outside of your own mindset. I used to be a really picky eater. So this is just a quick story, but very picky eater. Went to Cambodia. You can't really be picky. They eat different foods and they're very generous and their meals are long. You know, you sit through many courses all together. It's a really big event. And I remember them bringing out a lot of seafood dishes. And at the time it was like don't want to eat seafood. And then they were concerned that I wasn't eating. So my mom was trying to say like, she likes chicken. So they brought out a dish with chicken. But it still had like the chicken's legs on the platter and just totally different experience than I had ever had here. But still just like finding the joy within people and how much they put into the food and how much they accommodate and want you to feel comfortable and enjoy and participate. It makes you realize that, we're all just humans and food is delicious if you just try it, right? So that's probably the biggest thing I got from travel is really just people are amazing everywhere and food is delicious. You just have to try it.
Be open-minded a little bit. So how old were you when that first happened, when you were first kind of getting that experience?
I think our first trip I was 13. So I was pretty young. And then I got to go on a few others during my teenage years.
And then I'm thinking back to that moment when 13-year-old, which, 13-year-olds can have very specific tastes and preferences. And I mean, I would think, how did you in that moment, or did it take time? How did you actually, like, I feel like it's somewhat of a skill to be open-minded to trying new things like that. But like, did it come easy? Did it take like practice? Like, how did you actually work on that?
It took a lot of practice. And luckily, it did. It wasn't easy for me. But my mom is a great example of that, right? So she had traveled there before. She has traveled a lot, and she's always open-minded. So I kind of I didn't want to offend anybody. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And so you start to do it as a people pleaser thing first. Like, okay, I'll try this food that I've never tried before or do this experience that I normally wouldn't maybe do. And then the more you do it, the more you realize like it's not scary and it actually was really fun and it becomes one of your favorite memories. So one of the days we went on this boat tour on the river in Cambodia, and the driver of the boat stopped and climbed a tree and got us coconuts and then just gave us coconuts to drink. And it was like, how cool is that? Right? So you got to just embrace it sometimes, even if it seems a little bit scary.
Love that.
Yeah.
Wow. Fresh coconuts in Cambodia, right? on a boat on a river. That's really awesome.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Pretty cool. Okay. So fast forwarding, you end up getting an interview with TVF for a sales assistant role because your mom's buying fabric from the company. And it's with Ken. You kind of meet Ken Szynski through that, and then eventually Robert Hinch and others. So what do you remember the early years, and you're even starting from interviewing or, into the first few years? Like, what stands out for you, memories at TVF?
Yeah. I spend a lot of time thinking about this because, as a person, I'm a pretty positive person, and I like to have kind of a positive approach and really just feel how lucky I am in things that I've experienced. And I often think about how lucky I am that I got the job at TVF at the time that I did. I was lucky that I got to work next to Ken for so long. And he was in a position in his life and his career that he wanted someone to work alongside with him and kind of share what he knew. So I just feel tremendously lucky and blessed that that was my experience. And that he was so willing to kind of share information. And he really taught me a lot about just how work can be so much fun also. Like on top of working really hard, you can have a really fun time, which can, as anybody knows, uh, you know that to be very true. You can't go a day or maybe even 15 minutes without a good joke. So that's great. And then the same thing with Robert, really. It's, you know, at first I remember being sort of intimidated by Robert. He was the VP of the office and he was always busy and always working hard. And the more you get to know him, the more you love him, right? Like he's just somebody who really wants everyone to do well. And he tries really hard to impart any wisdom. So again, it's like, wow, how lucky am I, Sam, got to work along with these two guys who have so much to share and are willing to share it. So tremendously lucky that I kind of fell into my role at TVF when I did.
That's so cool. So something about you though, somehow did you feel when you took on that role, that sales assistant role, at what point did you know, or did you have this sense of like what the opportunity could be? And I don't mean opportunity meaning like promotions, but more like to learn from these like longtime veterans and like soak up this experience and knowledge. Was that something apparent early to you, or did that click in at some point later?
That's a good question. There was some level of it that was pretty early because I was green, you know, had never worked in textiles before. This was my first big office gig. So there's a lot to learn just in general. But then you layer in sales opportunities and you layer in textile learning of industries I've never worked in before. I remember once Robert just saying like, hey, if you have downtime, Google our customers, figure out what they do. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's a great idea. I should definitely do that. And then finding out like we have customers that do amazing things with our fabric that if I'm looking at it, I wouldn't really see it in some other in a cool bag or in a cool suit or anything like that. So I guess a lot of it just came down to kind of slowly realizing that there was so much to learn and then just trying to really take advantage of any opportunity I had to learn it.
Was there a point at which you were like, oh, this is actually, I could like make a lifelong career out of this? Or would that, like, do you remember about when that happened, if it happened?
That's a great question. There's little moments, but I remember one time there was a customer who was unhappy about a certain experience and I kind of helped out. I did what I could to kind of help out. And I remember Robert coming over and being like, you did a great job with that. And then I remember thinking like, I did. Like I did. Thank you. Like I did do a good job with that. So there's all these little moments where suddenly you feel like validated in kind of a skill set that you do have. And I was encouraged a lot because it's not my nature, I think, to, well, you know, sometimes you need a little shove, right? And Chris, you've helped give me a little push every now and then too, which has always been great. I know when we first started like the ESOP committee, there was one point where it was like, hey, do you want to lead it? And I was like, oh, I don't know that I could be me. And you're like, I think you should consider it. And I did. And it was a great experience, right? So I owe a lot of that to you too. I think one of my first speaking events, you were like, I think you could do this. And I was like, I think maybe you're right. Maybe I could do it. So there's been a lot of moments where I thought like, this was pretty great. And this could be a great career for me. And I think there's lots of opportunities. There's a lot to learn. I'm never going to know it all, which is something I also love in a weird way. I'll never be an expert in every textile. But it's always moving and it's always changing and there's always something new to learn about. There's always new people to meet, new customers to meet, new businesses that are opening that need fabrics for some unique reason. And I love that about this industry. So I'm very happy to be here. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, 12 years you've been at TVF now, roughly?
Yeah.
Has it gone fast? Or
fast. So fast. Crazy.
So in terms of it became something I know you're passionate about TVF and employee ownership and fabrics and all these things now. But in terms of this becoming a place that you thought you could really make a career at, like what's the mix between your love of fabrics versus your love of the people you get to work with versus the actual employee ownership part? Like, these are all different kind of elements of maybe what it is to be part of TVF. And I'm curious for you, like, what's the makeup there?
It's a good question because there is that unique feeling when you get your ESOP statement and
Mm.
you're like, wow, that's pretty great. Which is pretty cool when you work with people that you really like and you're in an industry that you enjoy and you get a lot of fulfillment from. And then you get this added statement and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. I couldn't do that on my own, I don't think. So it's really unique, but that plays a huge role in it. I think just wanting the company to do well, also wanting to do well for myself. And then on top of it being employee owned, knowing that the people that I work with are also wanting to do all of those things because we all have a stake in it is huge. It's really kind of like an underlying current, I think, for a lot of people at TVF, which is really great when you work with people who care.
Yeah. That's awesome. What else stands out in terms of, so we shift maybe from early years to middle of your career, 6-7 years ago. Mm-hmm. What were you thinking at that point in terms of how you would like to see your career go or play out, as you thought about the future?
Yeah. Well, I had always had high expectations for what I would do with my life. But about 6 or 7 years ago is when I had my first son, which shifts you. Motherhood is a unique experience, but total blessing, right? You have this baby who now takes up so much of your time. But what I realize is having a career and being fulfilled myself is also helping him. Like, it helps give him experiences, helps him give him like a mom who is happy with what she's doing and providing for her family. So it did shift my mindset just a little bit because now it's not just Sam who's just working for, all the like in a selfish way, but now I'm kind of spreading out what I want for my life, who I want in my life, who I'm doing this for. So that kind of changes you a little bit, but I do still have high expectations for myself and the work that I do and how involved I am. I never want my son to have a bad mentor in a way. I had such a great one growing up. My mom worked so hard, and it just makes me realize like how really cool that is. So I guess to answer your main question, a few years ago, I just thought, like, I'm gonna keep doing this thing. I'm gonna go as far as I can, and really kind of had a vision for what it could be for apparel and home. And at the time, it was mainly just apparel fabrics, working with Ken and knowing that he was going to retire, and really wondering what that division would look like and who could support it, and wondering if it could be me or someone else or how I can play a role in it. I wanted to learn as much as like our mills, as much as our customers. I wanted to soak it all up before I knew Ken was going to go, and make sure that I could support TVF in that transition. And I keep saying this a lot today, but I felt really lucky that I was given the chance to kind of help aid in that role and kind of given the position that I'm in today.
That's awesome. So I guess kind of fast forwarding, Ken ends up retiring here not too long ago, and you ended up taking over as a director of sales for apparel. What excites you when you think about the future for TVF, for you and for TVF from today, looking forward?
I think, so most of the fabric in our apparel and home divisions are for printing, digital printing, which I just think is such a cool market. And there's this whole push for on-demand, so custom on-demand products. And I really think and feel passionate about, our fabrics being used in that industry. So being able to pick a garment online and having it cut and sewn in the way that you want it to be made is really cool. And I think that's going to be really exciting for us to get into more and more as we head forward. I also think sustainability is kind of an interesting area for us to focus on as well. There's so many ways to look at it. And I always want to be cautious of any kind of greenwashing or
Yeah,
being careful how we talk about it, but just making sure that our products are the best that they can be in any way or form. Um, but I really think like the future is really exciting for the apparel and home divisions, and I'm really looking forward to it.
that's great.
Yeah.
What about any young people that have joined TVF in the last few years or people that might join in the future? What do you think they should be excited about for when it comes to being part of an Empowered Ventures company, an employee-owned company, TVF, et cetera?
Yeah. I think, well, to start, we have some amazing people at this company. So working with a company, I think, is unique in that you work with some really great people where the culture matters, where people care about how well the company is doing. And really, I credit all of that to being us being an ESOP. I think in similar companies, it doesn't exist or it's not kind of the same mentality. So knowing that we all have a role, we all are owners, we all have a responsibility kind of creates this accountability across the board. That's really important. And if you're new to TVF or you're just joining or you're super young, like take note of that because that's only going to be something that will help you moving forward. And I mean, it's just hold on until you get your first statement, right?
It is funny how that first statement and even the second and the third even like really kind of drive it home.
Yeah.
We use that when we talk to people that join, through acquisition or new hires, like consistently.
Mhm.
It is tough. Have you thought since your time leading one of the early employee ownership committees at TVF, have you thought about how we might be able to do that differently or better? Like how should we think about communicating the value and the potential of being in an employee-owned company, even though that first statement is when it really becomes real and it's
Right.
just a fact of the matter that kind of that's when it feels the most real. Well, how do you think about us communicating better in terms of the power of employee ownership?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Putting you on the spot, Sam.
Yeah, the first statement is sort of a mystery. You hear about it, and depending on when you get hired, sometimes it takes a little time for it to kick in.
Yeah.
But that's like the real proof. But until you get that, um, that's a great question. But I
Y-
think if you live by, like at TVF, we have some core values, right? And I think all of those are really important. Like put relationships first, be accountable, care deeply, always improve. I think that's all of them. I might have missed one, but if you really believe in those and you really take notice of those, I think then you start to realize what it means to be in an ownership culture. So having you're accountable. You say you're going to do something and you do it. You're putting relationships with your coworkers. A lot of that means a lot. It's not as tangible as a total on a statement, but if you're living and breathing those core values and you're learning what it's like to be in an ownership culture, I think that probably means more really in the long run. Even though having help with retirement is always great, but that's really what the proof's in the pudding. Is that the saying? But the core values I think mean a lot, and I don't know how you explain that, but I think encouraging people to kind of really think about what it means to be an owner and thinking like that is huge. And I know that you guys do that, but um, anyway, well,
That's great. Thank you.
yeah,
Helpful advice.
okay,
No, really, I think the core values at TVF, I think back to when those were put in place, the 5 core values, but also I think the 15 kind of defining behaviors that the entire team at TVF helped come up with that kind of define the 5 values. I think TVF's definitely been one of those companies where it actually has worked to define core values, refer to them. Can you share some examples? Not all companies are that successful at like using their core values. They can sometimes just end up on the wall and people don't really even think about them anymore. I don't think that's the case at TVF. So what comes to mind in terms of why TVF's been able to actually make those be meaningful and be
yeah.
part of the culture?
We talk about them a lot. I think that's a key. And sometimes it's almost as a joke. So when somebody does something, you say like hashtag always improve. You kind of
Yeah.
give each other props when you notice it. But we do talk about it a lot. And we do try to call it out when someone is living up to those core values. I think that's super important. There's something about like positive reinforcement that just makes it sticky. And we also have like a competition every year for the core value champions at TVF, where you can nominate your coworkers to somebody who has really lived up to one of those core values, which I think is great too, because it's a great way to recognize those around you who have been, living up those core values in a really spectacular way. So I think the key really is just to talk about it a lot and then really to encourage it and call it out when you see it. I know that's how I love it. I love when people say like, "Hey, Sam, way to, be accountable." And I really love to point it out to other people too. Even if it's a small thing like, "Hey, you put paper in the printer." Nice. You're caring about it. You're not leaving it for someone else to do. It's like little things mean a lot also. And it adds up. So
Actually, really love that. That is such a great point. It doesn't have to be waiting for something huge to happen and then they keep calling out some big, huge win. Even the tiniest thing can be noticed and appreciation shared. So, yeah. Sam, I have to say, you've always inspired me in terms of how much you care about people. So, I think hopefully that showed through a little bit today, but definitely when I think about my journey at TVF, thinking about how you started as a sales assistant and here you are today and your passion for people and with the product and the company, like I just want to say thank you. So grateful for what you've done for TVF so far and definitely believe it's just getting started. So thanks for coming on the podcast, Sam.
Thank you, Chris. It was my pleasure.